Welcome back to Sip and Talk, everybody. It's your host, Joe here, and as always, I'm with the amazing Sunny.
Hey, Joe. And all you lovely listeners out there, it's good to be back.
Now, Sunny, what have you been up to lately? Anything exciting happening in your world?
You know, just the usual chaos. Trying to train my cat to not walk on the keyboard while I'm working.
Ah, the classic cat conundrum. They always want to be right where they're not supposed to be.
Tell me about it. But hey, speaking of fascinating things, remember our last deep dive with Yuval Noah Harari? That whole great narrative of Invaders thing?
Oh, yeah. How could I forget? That one really got people talking. Everyone was buzzing about historical justice and peace.
Seriously, our inboxes were overflowing. It's like we tapped into some kind of collective consciousness or something.
Totally.
Yeah.
And since we love a good deep dive so much, we figured, why stop there? You gotta keep the conversation rolling.
Right on. So what's on the menu for today's deep dive? What rabbit hole are we jumping down?
Well, this time we're circling back to Harari, but with a new twist. We're tackling his TED Talk on the war in Ukraine.
Ooh, that's a heavy one. But definitely relevant to everything that's going on in the world right now.
Exactly. And we've been doing our homework articles, reports, even some thought-provoking think pieces, all about Harari's take on this whole situation.
Sounds intense. I'm ready to have my mind blown. So let's get into it. Where do we even begin with something as complex as this war?
Well, Harari starts by emphasizing the importance of understanding the historical context. So he really pushes back against this idea that Ukraine is just some extension of Russia.
Yeah.
You know, like it's always been part of Russia.
Yeah, I've heard that narrative floating around. But it sounds like Harari's challenging that assumption.
Big time. He even drops this crazy fact. Kyiv was a major city for centuries before Moscow even existed.
Oh, seriously, I had no clue. That completely changes my perspective. It's not just about some border dispute. It's about recognizing Ukraine's own distinct identity and history.
Exactly. It's like saying, hey, Sunny, you're not actually Sunny. You're just an extension of Joe. It's like, what?
Haha, okay, that's a terrifying thought. I definitely prefer to be my own independent Sunny, thank you very much.
Right? Like that makes zero sense. Each of us has our own story, our own unique path. And it's the same with Ukraine.
I'm starting to see what you mean. So this historical context is crucial, and it kind of reminds me of what Harari said about historical injustices in general. You know, we need to acknowledge them, learn from them, but not get trapped in this cycle of revenge.
Yeah, like let's not keep reliving the same old battles. Let's focus on building a better future instead. But, okay, let's talk about something that's been bugging me. There's this idea out there that many Russians actually support the war. You know, this whole patriotic fervor thing.
Right. I've heard that too, but I gotta admit, I'm a little skeptical about it myself.
Me too. And Harari seems to be on the same page. He points to the huge economic disparity in Russia. You know, you've got this tiny, super rich elite and then a vast majority of people who are struggling.
It's like having a diamond-encrusted cake, but only getting a tiny crumb, while everyone else is fighting over the scraps.
That's a perfect analogy. And Harari actually has this quote that really drives the point home. He says, Russia is a resource-rich country with many impoverished people.
Damn, that's powerful. It really makes you wonder, right? If Russia has all these resources, why are so many people living in poverty?
It's a head-scratcher for sure.
Right.
And I think that's what Harari is getting at. He's suggesting that maybe this war isn't really about what the Russian people want. Maybe it's more about the ambitions of a select few at the top.
Ooh, that's a spicy take. So you're saying it's not necessarily about national pride or defending the motherland. It's more about power plays and personal agendas.
That's the vibe I'm getting. And it all ties into what Harari calls Putin's long-term goal. You know, what's he really trying to achieve with all of this? And will he actually succeed?
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Spill the tea. What does Harari have to say about Putin's master plan?
Well, to unpack that, we got to move on to the global impact of the war, because this thing has tentacles reaching far beyond Ukraine.
Oh boy, things are about to get real interesting.
All right, so we've got this whole Ukraine situation, which is like way more complicated than it might seem at first glance. But let's zoom out a bit now. Look at the bigger picture, you know? What kind of global ripple effects are we talking about? I mean, I keep seeing news about a potential new arms race.
Yeah.
And I got to say, it's kind of freaking me out.
Yeah, I feel you. It's definitely a valid concern. And it's something that Harari addresses head on. He's not sugarcoating anything. He straight up says that the consequences of this war are going to be felt globally, not just confined to Ukraine and Russia. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that. But how does that actually play out? Like, what are we talking about here?
He uses this really interesting analogy of downward competition when he's talking about military spending.
Downward competition. Yeah, my brain needs a visual on this one. What does that even mean?
Imagine this Germany gets spooked by what's happening, you know? And they decide to beef up their military budget, right? Then Poland starts feeling a little insecure and thinks, hey, if Germany is doing it, we better do it too. And then it's like this domino effect. Countries all over the globe start funneling more and more money into weapons instead of investing in things that actually help people, like healthcare education or tackling climate change.
That's a pretty depressing thought. It's like everyone's so busy trying to build bigger, badder weapons that they forget about the real problems we need to be solving.
It's like that time I tried to bake a birthday cake, and I got so focused on making the frosting look perfect that I completely forgot to add the eggs.
Haha, oh no.
Yeah.
So it was like a flat pancake instead of a fluffy cake.
Pretty much. It was a disaster. But yeah, that's kind of what Harari's getting at with this downward competition idea. It's like this fear and insecurity can lead to a race to the bottom, where everyone loses in the end.
Okay, I'm getting a serious case of the global jitters here. Is there any good news in all of this? Harari must see some silver lining, right?
Actually, he does. And it's kind of surprising. He points to the way the war has actually revitalized the Western alliance. Remember all those culture wars we were talking about? The ones that were dividing everyone?
Yeah, those were getting pretty intense. Like everyone was at each other's throats.
Right. But it seems like the conflict in Ukraine has actually helped to bridge some of those divides.
Wait, seriously? So it's like a real life, the enemy of my enemy is my friend situation.
Exactly. Harari himself was surprised by how quickly and uniformly Europe responded to the crisis. Even countries that have traditionally been neutral are stepping up, sending aid and taking a stand.
That's kind of amazing. It's like everyone's realizing that some things are bigger than their differences.
Right. And Harari takes it even further. He suggests that this shared sense of purpose, this unity in the face of a common threat, could actually be the catalyst for healing some of those deep divisions we've been seeing in the West.
Whoa, that's a powerful thought. So you're saying this crisis could actually bring people together instead of tearing them apart.
Exactly. He argues that nationalism and liberalism, which many people see as being at odds with each other, can actually find common ground, especially when faced with a threat to the values they both hold dear, like freedom and democracy.
That's a really interesting perspective. So we've got this potential for newfound unity, but also this looming threat of an arms race spiraling out of control. It's like we're standing at a crossroads, facing some pretty weighty choices about the future. This is where I always get nervous. What about the future of humanity itself? Is Harari optimistic, or does he think we're all doomed?
Well, to answer that, we need to delve into Harari's vision of the future, and trust me, it's a wild ride.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. The war in Ukraine, the global ripple effects, even the potential for some unexpected unity in the West. But now let's get to the really mind-blowing stuff, the future of humanity. I'm kind of nervous to hear what Harari has to say, to be honest. I just want to give another shout out to Micky from Mickytolife. His channel is a treasure trove of inspiration, and he's a huge Sip&Talk fan.
Absolutely. Make sure to check him out and maybe even share your awesome podcast intro with him once you've created it.
Harari dives headfirst into the world of biotechnology and AI. You know, all that futuristic stuff.
He argues that these technologies are like fundamentally reshaping our world. And get this, he even says that humans are acquiring divine abilities.
Divine abilities?
Okay.
Is he talking about superpowers? Are we going to be shooting laser beams from our eyes or something?
Not quite. But he is talking about how we're gaining the ability to manipulate life itself, like through genetic engineering and stuff. And with AI, we're creating machines that can outperform us in more and more areas. It's kind of freaky when you think about it.
It's like that sci-fi movie where the robots take over the world.
Right. And he even talks about this concept of techno-religions.
Techno-religion? Okay, now I'm picturing robots wearing robes and chanting binary code.
It's not that literal, but it's a thought-provoking idea. He's saying that for some people, faith in technology is starting to replace traditional belief systems. You know, like technology promises solutions to all our problems, even immortality for some.
Yeah, I can see that. Like technology is becoming this all-powerful force that people are putting their faith in.
Exactly. And it's easy to get swept up in all the hype. But here's where I get nervous. What about the downsides? All this tech sounds amazing, but it also feels like we're opening Pandora's box. What if it just makes the rich richer and the poor poorer?
Right. Like what about the people who don't have access to all these fancy gadgets and treatments? Are they just going to get left behind?
That's a valid concern. And Harari definitely acknowledges that. He points out that while technology has the potential to improve our lives, it can also exacerbate existing inequalities.
Like a double-edged sword.
Exactly. And he compares our current anxiety to the way people felt back in the 19th century during the Industrial Revolution.
Oh, yeah, when all those new machines were changing everything.
Right. People were overwhelmed by the rapid changes, and many turned to fundamentalist movements for comfort and stability.
So you're saying we could see a similar backlash against technology today? People clinging to the past as the future becomes increasingly uncertain.
It's definitely a possibility. And it leads to a really important question that Harari asks. Where will the new stories and ideologies come from to help us navigate this crazy future? You know, if the old stories no longer resonate, who's going to tell us the new ones?
That's the million-dollar question. We need new ways of thinking, new narratives, to help us make sense of this rapidly changing world.
And Harari's answer is both fascinating and kind of scary. He says Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley, seriously? The land of tech giants and venture capitalists? Are you kidding me?
I know it sounds crazy, but he argues that Silicon Valley is where the most radical ideas about the future are being generated. They're the ones shaping the technology that's changing our lives. And they're also the ones telling us how to think about those changes.
So basically, they're the new storytellers.
In a way, yeah. It's a lot of power concentrated in one place.
It's both exciting and terrifying at the same time.
Yeah.
Like we're on the cusp of something huge, but we don't know if it's going to be amazing or disastrous.
I think that's the point Harari's trying to make. The future is uncertain, and there are definitely some scary possibilities. But we're not powerless. We have choices. We can shape the future we want.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
Definitely not. It's a call to action. It's about engaging with these big questions, thinking critically, and making conscious choices about the world we want to create.
That's a message I can get behind. We're not just passive passengers on this ride. We're the ones holding the steering wheel.
Exactly. And that's a pretty empowering thought. We have agency. We have the power to steer this ship in the right direction.
I love that. It's like he's saying, hey, the future's uncertain, but don't freak out. We got this. We can use our collective wisdom and creativity to build a better world.
Well said, Joe. That's a perfect way to wrap up this deep dive into Harari's mind-bending ideas.
It's been a wild ride. But ultimately, I think it's left me feeling hopeful, inspired, and ready to face whatever the future throws our way.
Me too. It's a reminder that even in the face of all these global challenges and rapid technological advancements, we have the power to shape our own destiny.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Sip and Talk. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey. And we'll see you next time for another deep dive into the unknown.